show you the Palestrina knot. Now I did another Palestrina knot video, but I got a comment from someone saying that they found it really hard to see because I had a green background, a green cloth, and was stitching with green thread. And I went back to the video and I'm thinking, what is she talking about, green background? And I was doing it on one of those, rotary cutter mats, and it was green. So it was a dark green, and then I was using this other green, and I thought, oh my gosh, how did that even happen? So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to do another Palestrina knot video, and I'm using a linen. This is a linen blend, and I'm using this. It's called Rainbow Tweed. It's 4-ply. I'm just using the whole ply. I guess for needlepoint and cross stitchers, you would do something else. I don't know. Anyway, I don't like to separate. So I'm using an 18 chenille needle, a chenille needle for the Palestrina knot. It's not a wrap stitch, so a chenille. So I'm coming up right in from my edge. I'm going to make a little horizontal. It's not total, well, it would be if I was holding it this way, a little horizontal stitch. And what that does is it gives me a little slanted stitch. Now I'm going to come in with the tip of my needle. You can also use the back, but for teaching purposes, I think it's easy to show it with the tip so it's not confusing. And so I go through that slant. Now I've got two legs. I've got this leg, right? And I've got this leg. And I want to come in with my needle. See how the thread is wrapping to the left? I'm going to come in with the tip of my needle in between those two legs, just like that, making sure that my needle goes over this thread that's going to the left. And that's my first little knot. I'm going to then go ahead and do another little horizontal stitch. I'm going to take the tip of my needle and go under that stitch, just like that. And now I've got my two legs, right? This one and this one. And I'm going to make sure that that thread is going around like this. I'm going to take the tip of my needle and I'm going to go right through those two legs, making sure that my needle goes over that thread. And I'm going to pull that through. Go ahead and make another horizontal stitch. Take my tip of my needle and go under that little stitch that I've created. Take the tip of my needle and go between this leg and this leg here. And I'm going to go right in there like that, making sure that my needle goes over that thread and it creates that little knot. I'm going to go ahead and do one more here before I turn for my zigzag. Little horizontal stitch. It creates this. I'm going to go right under that. And now I'm going to go under between these two legs. So I tuck my needle right under this leg, and I make sure that that needle is going over this thread, and it creates that loop. Now I'm doing a zigzag, so I'm going to go ahead and turn my fabric, and I'll continue with my next little horizontal stitch here. I'm keeping these fairly close together. You can play with them and make them go farther apart. It's going to be a different look. I love keeping them close like this. I love using a size 3 weight thread or something close to that because I really love how it gives me this nice ridge. But you can play with it. You can play with your thread weights. You can play with the types of threads that you use, and you can play with how far apart you keep these. Mine are fairly close. I'm also not pulling this so that it's very tight. I'm leaving it pretty relaxed. Not loose, but relaxed. Go ahead and do one more. I kept my thread at a short length because I wanted to show you what would happen if I run out in the middle of the stitch, and I haven't finished yet. So I'm going to go ahead, go between my two legs, right here, making sure that needle goes over the thread, pull it through, one more, tip under that stitch, and then around and under between the two legs and over the thread, pull it through. I'm going to go ahead and end my thread now, and the way I end it is I'm going to go right under here. I'm going to pull my thread through. I'm going to knot it on the back. Now, if I'm doing fine work, which I never do, you might end your thread differently by just weaving it under. You can also do that very typical embroidery, you know, when people work with hoops and they make a little end and then they stitch right over it so it's invisible. Mary Corbett has great instructions on all of that, so I highly recommend going over there if you want to know how to do all of that. I never do, so this isn't something that I use in my work, but it's fun to know how. I'm going to thread up another length of thread. I'm going to do my quilter's knot. And what I'm going to do is I'm coming in right where I ended. Right there. I'm going to pull my thread through. And I'm going to make my little my little horizontal, just like as though I had never ended. And that's how you change threads. So here's my little stitch that I created. Pull it through. And now I'm going to go through the two legs and pull it, and off I go. Horizontal stitch. Go under that stitch. Go between the legs. Horizontal stitch, under the stitch, between the legs, and now I could do one more, or I can start my V. Let's see if I start my V. Yeah, I can start my V right here. So I'll do another. So this is my zigzag, right? And I did a little light chalk mark just so it would kind of keep me on the straight and narrow. This is going to be a little blunted, this zig. It's okay. If I had wanted it really acute, to have that really acute V, what I would have done is I would have put my needle down here and then come back up just to give it so that it was not doing this. Do you see how it's kind of blunted? Had I done that, it would have been a much more severe V. I could also come back and just tack that down so that it made my V, but I'm not going to bother. But these are the kinds of things that I think about as I'm going, depending on what I'm doing, depending on how much I care. How important is that V for this tutorial? Not really. Okay, I'm going to show you how to do this with my right hand. For those of you who are right-handed, I'm going to end my thread by going right down, and there you have the little Palestrina knot. For right-handed, I'm going to come up on my edge, I'm going to do, instead of doing a horizontal line, I'm going to hold my fabric so that I'm doing a vertical. So I'm just going to come up here and do a little vertical line like this. I'm going to take the tip of my needle, making sure that it comes under this thread. So it looks like that. It's kind of a little cross, right? I've got my first stitch there and then my second stitch here so that my thread is over here. I'm going to make sure that my thread is wrapped to the left, and I'm going to come through this leg over the thread. And there's my little Palestrina knot. So again, vertical stitch, come under here, make sure my thread is looped to the left, and come through this leg. Go ahead and do my little vertical stitch. I'm also working from right to left, as opposed to when I'm left-handed, I'm working from left to right. My little stitch, bring my thread up through that stitch, and go through the two little legs. I can go ahead and do my next little vertical stitch. Take my needle, put it under that stitch, make sure that the thread is looping to the left, and go through those two legs with the needle going over the loop. I'll do it one more time. Make my stitch, bring my needle through, make sure that that thread is looping to the left, pierce my needle through those two legs, get my needle so that it goes through the two legs, and there's my little knot. So this one's a little bit farther apart, and this one's a little closer, and you can play with how far apart you make them, how close, different weights of thread, lots of fun. I wanted to show you some other examples of the Palestrina knot. On this piece, it was one of my improvisational stitching pieces. I made rows in this is a 3-weight cotton by Painter's thread, and I did just rows of Palestrina knots. I'll show you what this piece looks like. I'll give you a larger view of it right now so you can see what it ended up looking like. On my Making Waves, a drawstring bag, I did a Palestrina knot here. This is also, I believe this is in a 5-weight pearl cotton going around here. On this improvisational stitching piece, I did a Palestrina knot here in a metallic, and it's an 8-weight, and you can see it's just very tiny. On this improvisational piece, I did a Palestrina knot using a Painter soft cotton 3-weight going along here. I did another using also the Painter soft cotton in a different colorway going along here and along here. So I hope you found this helpful and you were able to follow along and see easily what I was doing. Once you get the hang of it, the stitch is a lot of fun and really pretty easy. And thanks so much for watching. Until next time, here's to stitching together.